right, so we should be live now. If you want to head over to the YouTube channel, you can also take a look, and we both can at just the to make sure the stream is working and people can hear us. And also, if you see any questions or anything, all right, that so we should be live now. There we go. So and if you're in, if you see any questions that you'd like to answer or anything like that, let me just find where that is.
Okay, yeah, I'm pulling up your YouTube on my phone, and I'm just going to mute my phone so that way.
Hey, Derek and Keenan, people are starting to find it a little bit. We do these impromptu. Usually I do it on Sunday, but today we have I was busy with family stuff, and Nathan, our guest for today, was kind enough to join me today to make up for the usual Sunday live stream that we do. Nathan, if you can just like introduce yourself a little bit and talk a little bit about your relationship with Pokemon and all that good stuff. I'm sure that people would like to know who I'm talking to today.
Yeah, so I'm Nathan, sub F Pokemon on Instagram.
I was busy with family stuff, and Nathan, our guest for today, was sorry, Nate. Hold on one sec. My apologies.
It's all good.
Getting multiple things open here. There we go. I think you should be good now.
All right, cool. So I'm Nathan, sub F Pokemon on Instagram. I've been doing trading cards, I guess, since I was a kid, but I stopped and I started again around sophomore year. That would be like 2010 maybe. Actually a little earlier than that. But I was into Yu-Gi-Oh back then, and then I eventually quit that and started collecting Pokemon again after finding my old cards. So I made that transition around 2015. And then I was in China studying overseas for about a year. And then I came back, and in late 2016 is when I started getting more serious into collecting and buying and selling. And so I've been pretty engaged with the hobby since then. And like 2015, 2016 was kind of like my research phase where, I started following a lot of the hobby and what was going on, making some questionable purchases, and some were pretty good.
As we all do to start.
Yeah. There were definitely some of the more memorable purchases, though. But yeah, so here we are today. Today I collect Chinese cards, I collect trophies, and I collect rarities. And even as a collector, like, things have changed. I've shifted certain things into others. So I'm just here to chat and have fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Nathan here, for a lot of you guys who may not know him, as he said, goes by Sub F. Some of you guys, I'm sure, do know him through that. Is someone who's very, very knowledgeable in the hobby. As he said, has been doing it a long time, and I think is particularly knowledgeable in some of the more kind of niche, unique areas of the market. He was just telling me before we came on the live stream, and he can show you guys if you'd like, but this like new Pikachu variation that you guys found of one of these old like Korokoro magazine type cards. And he's just someone who I think is really passionate about the history of the hobby, the kind of small, subtle variations, and enjoys learning about those things and collecting those things, as well as I think being very averse on the market side of the hobby, buying, flipping, selling, getting good deals in order, I think, similar to me, to build kind of a bigger collection, primarily, and putting a lot of that like money back in the hobby, maybe for certain trophy cards or things like that it might be harder to afford if not for that sort of thing. So yeah, do you want to show us some of the Pikachu stuff before we open it up for questions?
Sure. Yeah. So earlier today I was at work, and a good friend Elliot messaged me, and he was like, hey, this new Pikachu came up that's different, and we weren't sure if it was fake or real, because all we had was an image from a shop in Japan called Big Magic, and they posted it on Twitter, and they said that this isn't any of the variations that we found, so we're trying to determine the authenticity. And so I actually found out that I have one of each variation, and I'll kind of show you. It's going to be really hard to see, but the main thing is the centering on the Pikachu is different.
Mhm.
So both of these are the glossy Keiji Kinabuchi, which is the corrected illustrator versions. One, so the one that's where the Pikachu is centered. This one's the new version that we found.
Mm.
It's a really niche thing, but basically the newer version is the same centering as the 1996 Koro Koro magazine cover. And then the one that's justified to the left is the one that everyone else sees, that you see. It's the Ken Sugimori version, both the glossy and the non-glossy, and then the Keiji Kinabuchi non-glossy and glossy lottery copy, which you can find in like the 1998 Koro Koro. So just a cool tidbit.
Yeah, really cool. And there's going to be a E4 article written about this that's going to maybe go in a little bit more depth with like some close-up pictures to show the differences and things like that.
Yeah, so if y'all want to look for the article, Pro Chaos or Elliot, who I was talking about it with, he's going to be updating an article talking about the different variations of the Ivy Pikachu.
Yeah.
So we're still trying to figure out what it's from. It's just really hard to find like an exactly like this is what happened with these older cards. But we'll post what information we have.
Very cool. Yeah, so as people start to come in, if you guys have any questions for Nathan, I can certainly get the ball rolling. And I'm interested just to kind of get your maybe some, we can start kind of broad, just like your general feelings about everything this year, whether it's from a market standpoint or just like where you're at in terms of like you're collecting, kind of like whatever you feel like sharing, like whatever wherever your head is at with things. We can start there.
All right. This might set me off on a rather long rant, but
That's what this is for. This is all about the long rants.
yeah. So, I mean, the last 2 years have been a roller coaster, right? Like anyone who's been in the hobby or just joined the hobby has had really different experiences. Like just from when I joined back in like the 2015, 2016 time, that was also when Pokemon was, ramping up because of the 20th anniversary and certain things like that. It still wasn't nearly as popular as it is now, but I was part of that ramp up and then the slow decline because 2017, 2018 was pretty low point for Pokemon compared to now. And then 2019, we just shot up the cliff. Back then, I used to be a pretty big like WotC collector, English and Japanese stuff, like Japanese old back hollows. And I wasn't as much into the trophies because they were just out of my price range. Like I think I started in 2015 with maybe $20,000 from selling my Yu-Gi-Oh collection. And I had to be pretty careful about like what I would buy and whatnot, even though back then like a base first PSA 9 Charizard, I remember, was just under $2,000, which even compared to now, it's like what, like 25, depending on the auction. But
Yeah.
yeah, so in the past 2 years, what I've really been able to do is kind of leverage my like lower end like WotC stuff and the like PSA 10s, grade them, and kind of shift them towards trophies because I kind of decided that I was losing interest in the WotC and I wanted more to chase after something, and that's the trophies. And I mean, I have a couple examples here. Like this one I actually got from the winner recently. So that's 2012 number one.
A little bit of a pricey card.
Yeah, I talked to him and we came to an agreement. This was before any of them sold publicly.
Yeah.
But the half arts now I don't know if I would be able to move him off of it, but I offered him a very fair price back then. And, we both agreed it was from Canada and the logistics were a lot of fun. But just being in the hobby and into like a lot of that WotC stuff allowed me to shift it towards chasing more rarities.
Yeah.
And that's something that I really enjoyed in the last 2 years or so. It's something that I like never thought I would have a chance to do. And then also just learning a lot because with the popularity comes a lot more engagement as well. We've had so many new people in the community.
Yeah.
We've made a lot of new discoveries just in the last 2 years that, you never would think that you would discover something new from something that's, been out for 25 years. But whenever something new gets discovered, it's an amazing feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there are probably, a couple good lessons in there about that over time in the hobby, your feelings can change about like what you enjoy collecting, and you can kind of evolve as a collector. Um, which I think is true and interesting. I think is important for people to hear. I think too, the idea of like making connections and like friendships, and particularly when you're starting to get into like the trophy card market, where you're trying to track these things down, find these things, find the players who might be willing to sell it, or a collector who bought it from a player at some point. I think the importance of making those relationships, and I mean, you've made a lot of relationships, over the years, and been doing this for a while. How have you gone about like building those friendships and connections? Like, and what advice would you give for people now, where I do think they're in some ways it's easier, in some ways it's harder. I think it can be easier because there's like a lot more people who you could probably do that with. I think it's probably harder because there are a lot more people wanting to make those connections too, and I think interested. And so it's a little bit harder to get the ear maybe of someone that you want to get the ear of, or build that sort of friendship. But what would you say about all of that?
I think it definitely has gotten a little bit harder to talk to certain people lately,
Yeah.
just because everyone has gotten busier with how the hobby has progressed. But my advice would be to do as much research as you can yourself, because to build that genuine connection, you have to first show interest, like show that you've put forth the effort. Like if someone comes to me and they're just like, what do I buy? I have $1,000. I'm gonna be like, well, do some research, give me some of your opinions, and then I'll chat with you. Like I don't mind giving out information, but knowledge is power at the end of the day in this hobby. So you have to show that you're trying to put in the effort, and then a lot of people will reach out, and they people in this hobby love to talk about this hobby. Like that's one thing that's quite different from a lot of other things. Like some people will keep their secrets close to their heart, but
We
you
can't
just
keep our
find that,
mouths shut.
yeah, exactly, we just regurgitate for hours on end, and it's just, if you get someone talking, they'll tell you the world about Pokemon, but you just have to show some engagement.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, and I think that's definitely what I found. I got into the hobby in around like 2016,
mhm.
and I found that I spent like the first 2 years with my mouth shut, just like absorbing and basically listening to as like many people as possible, and then slowly started like talking to people, asking more of those specific type questions. I joined like Scott's Patreon for a year, for example, like somewhere in there, and now I had enough knowledge that I could like ask those more specific questions about certain things, right? And so it kind of move from one thing to the next. But it's so true that like we just like talking about this stuff so much that even though we might be competitive and like want the competitive advantage for ourselves of getting like one of those 20 cards, that it's very hard to not talk about it. And I think particularly when we're in like smaller discords and other types of places, it just we get so excited that that we can't help it. But at the end of the day, I think I mean, that's what brings so much enjoyment, is like doing with other people, and that other people are interested in the same sort of stuff. So it's a balance there, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I have so many friends that will, just chat me up because they're excited they found something, or
Yeah.
even just ask me an opinion like, hey, what do you think about this? And,
Yeah.
as long as I'm not busy, I'll take some time, write them back, or I'll hop in a call with them.
Yeah.
Um, it's
Yeah.
just very enjoyable to talk with people. And I think just reaching out to people and trying to engage with them is a big step.
Yeah. So what do you make of like the last 8 months or 10 months in the market? Do you follow like the whole market, or do you find yourself kind of focusing in on just things you're interested in? Like, where are you at these days?
So I do follow the whole market just because, I mean, my goal has always been to retire early, and part of that is always grinding until, I hit that point where I feel safe to retire with, with a family. And so I like to keep engaged with all parts of like the Pokemon market as well as some other hobbies,
Yeah.
just because you never know where opportunity comes up, and if you're not engaged, it's very hard to tell. But
Preach, preach. That's
yeah,
literally the best advice I know what to give you is like just be extremely engaged.
yeah, I know. I recently bought a house in November, and
Yeah.
but I've been looking for about 5 months before that,
Yeah.
and so all the way until, let's see, starting last March, I started selling bits and pieces of certain holdings that I had,
Yeah.
because I knew that this was not sustainable. Like when it first doubled, when the market first doubled, I was like, okay, this is like terrifying.
Yeah.
Like it's not natural. And then it doubled
Yeah.
again.
This was sort of like if we go through a timeline, for me, I think of it as roughly like, and things did double at different times, which was
Yeah.
interesting and kind of moved around, but it was like, we're kind of like March into April, ish in like 2020. And we see kind of like a first double of like most of the vintage stuff. Although we saw like at least a 50% sort of slower creep up in like, the gym sets were one of the first ones to move, then the Neos, with base set first edition kind of lagging behind till Logan Paul came in. And then you saw that first double. And what were you thinking? Like, okay, what is happening? what
Yeah.
is
I was just like, I stopped buying. On the first double, I was just like, I don't know what's happening. I have a good holding and stuff. I'm gonna wait and just see. I sold off some things that I just had a lot of copies of, stuff like that, or stuff that I wasn't planning to grade. And then the market doubled again. And currently, I'm just talking about the English market. It's fascinating because you could tell how much new interest there was, because all of the price hikes were in the English market for like the first, is probably like 6 to 8 months. Um, and I've, even back then, I was about half and half between English and Japanese in terms of like my own holdings and whatnot. But I started slowly selling things off because, I didn't want to regret completely missing it, but I also knew that, if it kept going up, I could just slowly piece out things that I wanted to. But we basically saw like 10 years of growth in the course of, 18 months. And the Japanese market pretty much mirrored the English market, to where even 12 months ago, I think you could find deals in Japan, bring them to the US, and still make some profit. Whereas now the English market has caught up to where you can, let's see, what's the best way to put it? Back then, you would arbitrage the Japanese and English prices and make some money. Now I've been buy listing things back to Japan because so many people are trying to buy that and do it, but things are coming back from grading and they're just not moving. So in the US, the prices are lower than Japan. And you see that in a lot of cards. So I was in Japan like 4 weeks ago.
or Japanese cards specifically you're talking
Yeah,
about?
for Japanese
Yeah.
cards. And I remember going to Card Rush and I just buy listed a bunch of stuff. It was like it would cost me more to grade it and to sell it and eat the fees than they're just paying on buy lists. But in the past like 6 months or so, we've seen a lot of prices. Has it been 6 months already? Yeah, just about. Slowly starting to retrace, and they're still way higher than they were 2 years ago. But I think they're getting to a point where I'm feeling a little bit better about the market. I'm still focused on buying mainly trophy cards and things that I don't think I'll be able to acquire going on to the future, which that's like kind of another topic entirely, because I think Pokemon's going to have a lot of change coming in the next year or two. Um, but yeah, so we've
Yeah.
basically watched that whole roller coaster happen in the last 18 months, and it's just fascinating watching it happen in a hobby that I'm engaged with, I guess
Yeah.
I should say.
Yeah, I mean, my strategy, I stopped buying around August, basically, outside of trophy cards,
Mhm.
and a little bit of first edition base because it was lagging behind. I made a few first edition base purchases, and then when Logan Paul came in, it was just basically selling for 6 months straight. Slow though, I wasn't like pushing it out the door. And I was putting it in like other hobbies basically and other card hobbies because for me, and going back to what you're saying, like I have a lot of theories about how like I'm one of the only young people involved in certain hobbies right now. In some old vintage cards and other sorts of things that I think would appeal to young people, but there isn't like the social media around it. So there's a lot of things that I think is why I preach. It's that like don't follow the herd, you know, do the research yourself and then find what like makes sense and trust yourself and move on to that, particularly once you've done this for a while. You can kind of get a sense of, and then be very conservative. That's the other part. Like for me, when I'm taking those riskier plays in stuff that like may never grow or find that catalyst, it's all about like the price point you're buying them at, the relative value you see there versus something else. And then ideally you also enjoy those things as a collector. So if you do get stuck with them, you're happy to have them and you didn't need them, or need to resell them. But so you mentioned you're into some other things. Did you do a similar thing where you were kind of buying into other hobbies this year?
Yeah, so I've definitely diversified quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think, let's see, how long ago it was. Maybe about a year ago. I started. Wait, let me rephrase that. So about a year ago, I stopped buying collections because I was thinking the prices are too high for raw cards,
Yeah.
unless it was just a home run that I knew that I could flip within the next, 2 months. I wouldn't touch the collection. And so as things were selling, I started shifting those funds into different things. Like about 12 months ago, Yu-Gi-Oh was still lagging behind quite a bit. So I bought back some of the things that I had sold when I quit Yu-Gi-Oh and switched Pokemon in 2015. So like LOB boxes, like full set stuff like that, just like minty stuff that I think was going to disappear off the market. And Yu-Gi-Oh is a different beast. It's very like play driven and less collector driven.
Yeah.
So that's a completely different conversation. But I've also diversified into things like I bought a Harry Potter first print book.
Yeah.
It's always something that I thought was super cool. And when looking at like Pokemon card prices versus the price of that, it was just an easy decision for me. And that's something that even if it's not worth anything, it's just something I love to have. Um,
And
I
that's a good
also,
sign that maybe something here is out of whack because there aren't like you and I really like Pokemon. We are the high end consumers as collectors too, right? So if we think things are very, very overvalued, either you need people who are a lot more wealthy than us or who want these things a lot more. And part of the problem with the Pokemon card market is like we are some of the older people in the hobby with probably some of the most money. So you got to be careful. Like when people like us, I think, start seeing, and one of the warning signs for me was like everyone who had been in the hobby a long time was selling,
yeah,
like we, and I think some of the newer people were arguing, which is fair, that maybe it's like we're shocked by the prices or we don't understand how valuable these things are or these types of things. But another way to think about it is we understand a lot more because we've actually been here. We've had these things in our possession for many years. We know what it's like to own these items. We know how much we enjoy them, and we know how much we might enjoy a first edition Harry Potter book over that. And you've owned this thing for a month, and maybe you're getting invested in a little bit of that hype, and a little bit of that excitement, and that sort of thing. So
yeah,
but
for sure. Like one thing that I've been looking at in for the past 12 months is
yeah.
opportunity cost and downside risk, because I never thought that I would be in a position to be able to make these sort of financial decisions
Mm.
like at this point in my life. And so my thing was that if I play this correctly, then I could, it sets me up for retirement, because there's a lot of people who aren't in a place to ever retire. That, they might not have a savings account, or, it's very hard to go through society these days and feel very safe for retirement if you're just working a normal job. And so part of it was me thinking, what can I move into that has less downside risk? And right now, Pokemon's so high that I just can't justify the opportunity cost that I'm giving up if I'm buying more Pokemon.
Yeah.
So there's certain things like trophies that I have moved into that I think just have slightly less downside risk. it's still going to move with the Pokemon market as a whole, but I've also bought into like White Shorts and like Yu-Gi-Oh and different things. Even like non-collectible things. Like I've set aside money. I've moved a little bit more into the stock market, things like that, where I've kind of been lowering my risk in the last 12 months and more of trying to maintain the wealth and not being there for the falling blade.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, both you and I might have missed after that second double up. There might have been a window where we like should have bought more and then sold again. But it's like, that type of stuff. And so one thing I think that'd be interesting for us to talk about, I'm hearing a lot of like timing the market versus time in the market type conversation. And to me, being a smart investor is actually doing both. And there's a little bit of like a simplistic, I think, false sort of separation that's being created where like the smart people like don't have paper hands and know to just hold things forever. and the dumb people panic, they buy it, the hype, and they saw, and, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that. I think we are two people who we are constantly trying to do both. And for me, I'm trying to identify the items that I want a lot of time in. And I'm trying to also identify the items that I think are really undervalued or I'm getting a great deal on the market. But I don't see a lot of upside in that item. So for me, it's more of an item, just like an item you showed me today that you got off of PWCC, where it's like, this isn't necessarily an item that I'm looking to invest in, but it's an item that I think the market has really underpriced right this second. And I think there's good reason to think that it's going to move up in the future, and or it's literally like an auction just fell through the cracks and you bought it for way under market, type of buying. And then it makes sense to flip that and maybe buy something that, that, and I think of examples like for me, like I went through a period of buying like a lot of modern stuff and modern collections and, graded them and sold them and, grinded out 20, 40, 50, 60 bucks on certain items and on certain lots, seeing the opportunity there. Although to your opportunity cost thing, I don't do that. I didn't do that for too long, but because it is time consuming and difficult, but that to me was the appropriate or the smart thing to do with that sort of stuff, where there might be other items, maybe trophy items. Now we'll have to see, maybe some, PSA 10 low pop, first appearance, WotC first edition cards, some similarly rare Japanese, some similarly, or I should say not rare, but desired Japanese cards, as maybe better holds for the future. What do you make of that whole like timing the market versus time in the market, as someone who invests and is starting to invest in other things too? What's your opinion?
I mean, neither are foolproof in my opinion. So time in the market, that is only correct if you read the market correctly, because you could be in a hobby for 15 years and it could never go anywhere. There's plenty of things like that. So time in the hobby doesn't necessarily equal success, and neither does timing the market, because nobody's ever going to read everything 100% correct. You just don't have the information or the processing power to do it. So I think more importantly, you should set goals for yourself. Like if you invest in 10 copies of a card, once it hits a certain price point, you sell it. You get your cost out of it, and then you're not worried about holding that any further. If the market drops, you can just throw it in a box. If it doesn't, then you keep selling as the price goes higher, and you just sell it out at different tiers. Like a very good example is like Mario and Luigi Pikachu's. I think I had like 15 sealed boxes of each one, and then I probably had 10 of each of the promos as well. And I remember when I first got them, they were $25. They hit 100, and I sold 4 of each sealed box. They hit 200. I sold 4 more of each sealed box. And as the market kept going, I kept selling. And
paper hands over here.
yeah,
whole joke of it.
But the thing is, like, there's no regrets, because whenever I would sell something, I would move it into something else. And part of it, if you have infinite money, of course, holding something and waiting for the long run is the play, but most people in this world don't. And as bad as like being a flipper sounds these days, if you don't have like, $200,000, $300,000 that you can just let sit, flipping is actually pretty efficient because you can leverage your money that way. I mean, making 8% on, $100, 10 times throughout the year is going to be better than buying something that's $100 and just sitting on it. When you go into the like long-term investing and holding side is when you no longer have the time to utilize all of your capital. So then you allocate a portion of that into things that you would hold long-term because nobody has infinite time. Like I know back when I first started, I would deal with cards that were, a quarter bulk. I would deal with $5 cards. Now I don't think I have anything listed under like $25. And even those, I'm like, do I really want to list this? So there's things that I just shift to other people. Like I'll buy list stuff because it's just not worth my time to deal with at this point. Because by trying to sell something that's lower end, my opportunity cost is, maybe losing out moving something that's $200 or $300. And then one of the reasons that I've been moving into trophies is because I think the market's changing. Like Pokemon has been becoming much more accepted as a mainstream asset. And so has collectibles as a whole, like whether that's video games, Pokemon, Magic's been there for a while, but sports cards are, they've seen a rise as well. But you see a lot of institutional money starting to make their moves, like Blackstone buying CGC, Nat Turner buying PSA and WADA and whatnot. You see some big net worth individuals show interest in collectibles. And even Steve Aoki, I'm not a fan of his signature on cards. It has nothing to do with the card, but that's beyond the point. But there are large net worth individuals that are showing interest in Pokemon. And so I've been trying to acquire trophies before I just don't have a chance to anymore. Like the prices of some trophies now, I would have to work several years to buy them outright. So leveraging what I had in my collection into some of the trophies has really been a blessing. And I think in the long term, they'll do really well. There's a chance that, they don't go anywhere, but I want to acquire these before the institutional money comes in is that's kind of how I see it. I may have gone off topic for your question.
No. It's great. I think the way that I view it, so there's obviously a relationship between these things. Mm-hmm. And the way that I view it is most people who collect trophy cards, who are really into trophy cards, generally speaking, have been in the hobby for a while, right? And so when you first jump back into the hobby, you're probably not going to go after those things first, unless you're watching an influencer like Scott Pratt or something who you really trust and says, buy the Pikachu Illustrator and you have a lot of money, like Steve Aoki or so, someone like this, and they go out and they just grab it, right? And they can afford that. But for most people, they're going to go after what they understand, what they know, what they think is going to make them the most happy. It's very rational and reasonable. And then as time goes on, they get bored of that, or they've already accomplished those goals. And it doesn't mean that they don't really like those cards and they don't enjoy looking at them. But part of collecting is also then maybe selling some of that stuff, just like you did, and collecting something different or something that has a chase to it, or, and a number of people may never do that. And they might just be like, well, I'm satisfied with my Wansea collection and I'm not interested in this sort of stuff. Okay. But I do think a good portion of it has to do with the amount of the amount that these set cards are going for versus the amount of the trophies that are going for. So like for me, when the set cards have come, like right now is by far a better time to buy set cards than in the last 10 months with the panic in the demand side. And people are flocking more to rarity. So right now on my channel, the whole time I was like, guys, only buy, basically the only set cards I would even consider touching would be like a Neo, Low Pop, or E-Series, like in this current market, if you're thinking about from a financial perspective, where there's still these trophy cards that people don't know about, that you should probably be buying, that are going to go up more and be more resilient, right, to these types of retraces, probably. But now I think we've shifted back a little bit, where some of the panic has happened on those set cards, where there might be some better, opportunities on some of those, and they might actually do better long term on a percentage basis than some of these other trophy cards. Now, when we talk about the really high end trophy card, though, that's something that like has such high potential, explosive, exponential growth if you just have a couple people interested in an item if there are only 4 of that item or 3 of that item or 1 of that item. If we're also talking about, like, yeah, exactly. If we're talking about a weird wacky card like that, and or 1 of an item, if we're talking about like condition rarity combined with an already very like overall rare card. And so I think that the other part of that too is that like people like you and I, there are going to be a number of us who do have $100 million one day, 150, who have the money one day because they're going to start some, tech company that explodes or whatever, from our generation, who aren't celebrity, like older celebrities right now, like Steve Aoki, who are going to have that money in the future and may be interested in cards like that because it's the most interesting collectible to them from their favorite hobby. So I think that's where the upside on some of those items are. That's what happened to an Action Comics #1, which isn't a trophy, but has an amazing absolute rarity of like 100 copies, right? These types of things. So yeah, what do you think? What do you think about all of that? Although I do think there's some downside and there's some risk involved in that sort of stuff, particularly because there's not a lot of data on trophies from other hobbies. It's a little bit of this interesting thing where, with the Action Comics #1, and then I'll let you go. It's also the first appearance of Superman. It's also a set card, right? It's part of the set, And so that's the one thing I worry about is like, what are people going to just be like, I prefer the most valuable set card? But I'm with you. I mean, I think the trophies at the end of the day are the best bet on that end. But
yeah. So, I mean, right now, I definitely think there's a lot of value looking at English. Like, I'm not buying any Japanese right now unless I just find something that, someone else hasn't discovered or a steal. But I think there's just a big differentiation between different people in the market. There are people who are emotionally collecting. They're trying to finish a set, a completionist, whatnot. And I think that's what makes up the majority. I would say like 99.99% of the market is going to be someone like that who is emotionally invested. But when you talk about institutional money, you're also talking about people who are looking to leverage the money that they currently have. And they're in it more for maintaining wealth and growth. Like you see this a lot with like very high net worth individuals. They don't bother with like regular like real estate because it's just not worth the time for them to manage it. They might have a company that does it, but they're not going to go touch, like they're not going to go flip houses or go buy 20 houses and go rent them because it's not worth their time.
They're looking for diversification in big items. And
yeah, so they're looking for just the very tip top. And that's why I think as the hobby matures and it becomes more widely accepted, it's going to be very hard to pick up really the top tier trophies. And that's one of the reasons why I've been chasing them, because I think in the next couple of years is probably going to be my last chance to really pick up any of them before they become out of my range as well. At some point, I don't think you care about like some of the really high-end investors. Like I don't think Steve Aoki really cares about the illustrator that much. Like I'm sure someone showed him like, hey, this is like the top of the hobby, and he was like 400,000. That's it. Like, just hand it to me. And although he's going to do stuff for publicity, right? Because part of that is starting his own card house, his card shop, and whatnot, and having that attention does very well for him. Like he's not into the illustrator for 400. He's into it for 400K minus, whatever he made from advertising and that buzz that it generated. So he has additional things that he can leverage to kind of lower the cost on certain cards. But when it comes to like the really tip top investors, people who throw around millions, like they're not going to take their time to go buy, a base first shadowless set. They're just going to go look for something that they can buy, probably in the 6 digits, most likely, if they're into that. It's just not worth their time to mess with the smalls or do the research. They're just going to come to someone who's in the hobby and just say, I have this much I want to invest. Where do I put it? So.
Yeah, I definitely think there's some truth to that, but like someone like Steve Aoki to me is probably someone who is a collector and a collector type and likes things. Mm-hmm. And part of that might just be, as you said, liking expensive things. I just want the best of everything. And in his case, it sounds like Japanese. Like I want the best of every Japanese collectible out there, whether it's from sports or, or whatever, because I know he collects Japanese Wily, Japanese anything. It's why he's interested in DBZ, why he's interested in Yu-Gi-Oh, all these types of things. So I think that now when you talk about like these straight institutional people who are coming in and maybe looking at it as like, we can outperform the stock market here, or we can outperform some other sorts of things, that's where I get a little bit like, I'm not sure how sustainable that is in collectible hobbies in general. Although I do think that when people have a lot of money, or some of these people, they might look for like a little bit of extra diversification. And with that little bit of extra diversification, because if someone has $1 billion and it's just a few $100,000, that's an extremely small percentage of their portfolio. They might say, all right, let's buy the best comic book, the best, well, that would cost you millions, but the best of all these different things. I can see that, but I do think that it's going to be interesting to see if these outpace the rest of the market, and if the majority of the money is coming from like an institutional investor or like really high-end collectors, or if the majority of money is coming from people interested in modern. And like what we've seen right now is like the majority of the money in the hobby is in evolutions. Like just to throw it out there, like evolutions booster boxes, the most money in the hobby right now, I would argue, like, in fact, I'm like almost 100% sure by sitting down and doing the math for a little bit, is in evolutions. And then Hidden Fates as probably like number 2, and Hidden Fates associated product and cards and all these sorts of things. And so it's really interesting, right? Because that's totally the opposite, where it's being highly, highly driven by your normal kind of average collector interested in the new hot thing.
Yeah. And that kind of brings me back to what I was saying earlier in terms of opportunity cost.
Yeah.
For me, it's not that I think that trophies will be the best margin going forward. It's more of, I think that if I don't hit my collection goals for that, I'm probably not going to ever. Because set cards, I can always go back and pick them up eventually. But I think just the window on trophies is going to slowly close. So that's kind of like a personal conscious decision. Also, for me, it's downside risk. Like, I think trophies have a much lower downside risk than evolutions. And I mean, I had a lot of evolutions. I think I had 10 cases when it spiked, and I slowly sold that up. I think I sold out at 400 a box, which I was very, very happy with for something that I held on for 2 years. It was stellar, but a lot of that is my own gauge of downside risk, and that's why I got into other hobbies as well, like Yu-Gi-Oh and Y Shorts, because they didn't rise as much.
You and I tend to have the exact same instincts on all these things. Like 400 is exactly where I was like, if I own this, I would sell. This has been pushed up a ton. I'd say things on my channel, like I could see it doubling again because the intensity of this is so much. But like, I'm not a financial advisor and I don't want people to listen to me and lose money. So I was very like careful with my words, but I was like, I would definitely sell everything at $400 and just be really happy. And what I've done with that money, and what did I do with I sold all my base stuff right around then, all my like PSA base cards are the vast majority. And I moved it directly into these other hobbies. I moved it into Marvel. I moved it into DBZ, Harry Potter, bought a lot of like sealed product. When it was like, $35, $80 a box, those Harry Potter boxes. Did you do any of the Harry Potter boxes?
I think I have 400 Quidditch Cup, or I had 400 Quidditch Cup boxes that I got in at 27 a box.
That's what I did too.
And then Diagon Alley, base set, base blisters. I was the one that bought out hills of base set blisters. Because I was like, the blister boxes for like, I think it was like 200 each. It was just like, it ended up being like $8 a blister, and I was just like, blisters, they're just hard to maintain. It's hard to find sealed boxes of them. Like they're just great for display as well. So I did buy a good position in Harry Potter.
These were extremely undervalued items from a collector enjoyment perspective. For $27, you can open up an amazingly cool vintage Wizards of the Coast box with cool Harry Potter art and cards. I mean, it was just, and at the same time, base set Pokemon was worth $30,000, $35,000 a box at its height. It's just like, Where are you going to
There
put
is just
the
no
money?
downside risk. Like, how much lower can you go? Like 27 to 13? Like,
The
okay,
downside risk is illiquidity, right?
yeah.
That's on when you go into items like that, the downside risk is no interest. And then
Yeah.
just like you have to sit in it for a long time and you sell one at a time. And I would say it's the same thing for like people buying battle styles boxes. Now those have more room to go down, right? Those could actually go to $40 a box one day or $60 a box or even 20 or 10. Although if that's at 20 or 10, Pokemon's in trouble. I would say like then we're probably having more broader problems. But if that goes down to 60, Pokemon could be like doing great. And a box like that could go down to 60 in my mind. So it's liquidity. It's that you're going to have a bunch of it and you're not going to be able to sell it because there isn't going to be enough people to want it. And you can hold it at that price. You might sell one every few months, but it might be tricky because there's just too much supply.
Well,
And then eventually it might
so
get put out and go back up. But
yeah, so that's where you have to judge for yourself. Like I'm not at a point where liquidity is an issue. I'm also looking pretty long term. Like I'm looking to maintain my current wealth and hopefully make some money, at least for this next cycle of collectibles being a trend.
yeah,
And so I don't mind sitting on something that I have $27 a box in. Like it's very low risk for me. That's also why I looked into Weiss Schwartz,
yeah,
which I just studied that market and it fascinates me. Like the fact that anime is becoming a little bit more mainstream is one factor that I really like about it.
yeah,
The other is that it was always print to demand, and from 2012 to 2018, there was zero demand, or zero in comparison to other games. So like some of the older sets, like you can't even find them. Like it's not about the money in that hobby; it's about the acquisition.
yeah,
And then you have like, I really enjoy anime. I'm kind of an anime nerd in my free time. But there's like certain prize cards from like the Fate series or from like Cardcaptor Sakura that are like world's trophies that there's 15, 20 something copies of, and they were just so undervalued in my opinion compared to other markets. And it was just a no-brainer. Like I could move a set card for 10K and just buy like a world's trophy that there's like 15 copies of. And
yeah.
maybe it goes down to 500, but that's something that I'm willing to take the risk on because I personally think that there's a lot less downside.
Yeah, I mean, I think the risk is higher for something like that because of like IP,
Hmm.
like for me personally. But that also is why those things are often cheaper and underpriced because people undervalue or underappreciate. Now I know there's a lot of IPs within it,
Hmm.
but the overall, it's not as I think simple as like this is the
Yep.
first Pokemon card, this is the first Batman, Superman, whatever it is, or DBZ card, or or Yu-Gi-Oh card. So it's a little bit harder, but but it's I mean
It's
something like
definitely
Naruto,
a completely
you
different
know.
market.
Yeah, I mean something like Naruto was really interesting to me because like Squeaks made a killing off of like those Naruto boxes, for example. And Naruto is just something I know nothing about, so I just missed out because I know that it's obviously popular and there are like endless episodes and all those sorts of things. But it's an example of where like he knew that people there are a lot of Naruto fans out there, and knew how short printed those boxes were and how cheap they were. And while I was buying a bunch of DBZ, he was buying Naruto, and he did better on the Naruto boxes than I did on the DBZ. I mean, we still both did very well, but and that's an example of like where knowledge is power. And at the exact same time I was doing all of that, I was getting all these people flooding my inbox, like at least 5 to 10 people saying, "You're an idiot for putting your money anywhere else than Pokemon," right? Just like Pokemon's the only thing that people like. It's like the delusion of like the bubble and the yeah, the bubble thinking and the like. And also I think there's a selfishness. There's like, I have all my money in Pokemon, don't tell anyone to ever put money in anything other than Pokemon, because on some level people are realize that like the more money any of us put in anything else, the less money is going to go directly into like their Pokemon cards and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's really wild. But I think that yeah, for me, I have like my long-term collection goals, and those include tons and tons of set cards. How about for you though? like do you have those set card goals in all of these different hobbies, or are you like able to just like, I just need to own like the trophy cards and I feel like I have this collection that I feel really good about?
So when I first started, I was very similar. I had a
Yeah.
lot of set card goals, and I finished, let's see, I didn't bother with Legendary Collection, but I finished every other set for WotC, and then including the E Series sets.
Hmm.
And I've this is like kind of a weird term that I don't know if I'm coining it, but I'm kind of like a pass-through collector. So when I
Okay.
finish something, I love the thrill of the chase, and then I put it in a binder and I just don't open it. So at one point I realized like it's not like I'm opening these binders, every day or every week or even every month to look at them once I finish it. So I decided, since I don't have infinite capital, it was better for me to take those things to grade them or to sell them raw and to leverage that capital into other things. And so my goal is more of to own one of everything at some point in my life and be able to hold it and treasure it. And it's the memories that I collect and the thrill of the chase. Like I love chasing after something that I think is unobtainable. Like
Yeah.
almost all of my collection goals are things that I don't know if I'll ever be able to hit, or all of my current ones. Like one, just an example, I collect Chinese Pokemon, and base set first edition in Chinese, the hollows are notoriously hard to grade,
Yeah.
because they were the first card in the pack, so all of them have some sort of edge wear. Um, and about half of the pop report is like pop ones or pop zeros. So there's some that like I just can't physically buy. Like you can't buy it. You either have to grade it yourself or someone has to grade it. But that's been one of my goals in just chasing it down and tracking where they are. Like I think I know about 80% of the Chinese based first edition PSA 10s and where they are. So it's stuff like that that I really enjoy, and the memories from that I keep. And so that's when I kind of strayed away from set collecting and kind of use that as leverage to move into other things. And it's the same with like Japanese stuff. Like I finished all of the Japanese sets at one point. I finished a lot of the promo sets. There's a lot of things that I've collected once and then passed on, but trophies are something that I've kind of held on to. Um, I don't
Yeah.
know. It's just kind of a weird thought that I'm a pass-through collector.
I mean, I definitely feel the same way about chase as you, and the enjoyment of like setting new challenges and then more and more difficult ones, and then the thrill of like completing those things. I do also, I think, intentionally try and spend a lot of time with lots of things that I like, no matter the price or rarity.
Mhm.
And I think I do that like intentionally, because yes, of course, when you like get $100,000 card and you put that on your display, it's like, whoa, I mean, there's a wow factor that's beyond just the card itself. It's also that there are only a few of these in the world, and the price tag and how much people are willing to pay for it creates a feeling with it, a wow feeling. But I also like to appreciate, like I have memories of like seeing the first time I saw like a Versus Series card. And I remember like
Mhm.
the first Versus Series card I ever saw and being like, what is that? Oh my gosh. And then like, so that's a card that's really special to me. So I have like a couple pages, of just that card. So like these types of, I like document in some sense, like my experience with the hobby, and like and as I get older too, and my experience in these other hobbies too, there's certain things that are sort of like just important to me because my own experience with them. And so I have those. And then I think about like, okay, what's important to everyone? And from my financial investing, side of it, because not all you can, just because I really like that Versus Series card, because I have some random relationship with it, doesn't mean that, most other people are going to feel the same way. So we have a
Yeah.
super chat here. Say, hey gentlemen, what is your opinion on the first edition Shining Charizard PSA 10 in terms of a long-term hold versus sell soon? Thanks for your insight. You want to give some specific thoughts on a card like that? You don't have
Yeah.
to.
So, I mean, throughout my time in the hobby, I think I've owned close to double-digit copies of those, and I've bought and sold them at various points. In terms of the current situation, I think if you're looking to hold it for like 5 years, 10 years, I think it's fine as a hold. But if you think that you're going to need that money in the next 2 or 3 years, I don't think that it's going to move in the next 2 or 3 years, if that helps. It's just right now, Pokemon is still trending downwards. And for something that's, although it is rare for a set card, it is also a very high price tag. So as the whole market trends downwards, people are going to be more cautious into buying things like those. It's going to be hard to push the price up.
I think it's easier for me personally to justify spending $18,000 on absolute rarity over condition rarity. And that is a set card where there are hundreds of thousands of copies of that card probably in the world, or at least tens of thousands of the first edition, probably into the 100,000. I mean, who knows, right? I don't know if you have any estimate on that, Nate, or what sounds right to you, but
it's probably in the tens.
And so for me, it's just $18,000 a huge, or whatever it is right now. I know it was up to 25. I think it came down to 13. I want to say it's like a lot of those cards have bounced back a little bit, depending on the card, which I think is a good sign. So I think that there are usually in markets when things go up really, really high, really fast, they come down really fast, just as fast often, unless the correction is more due to a fundamental shift or change in the specific items and not a psychological emotional one. That's another discussion. But so what I would say is that I think that these items moving all the way back down to 13,000, and then if you at that point were like, okay, we had a hard crash on this item, it seems to be stabilizing around this price. I think betting that it might come back up to that 18,000, is like, items do move that way. It doesn't mean that one is going to, it could continue to go down, but generally they're like, when an item moves really quickly down, the market hasn't had a chance to like reflect on it and think about it. And so sometimes what you see is now there are enough people who, like, after the panic sell, they're like, well, I think I can get it cheaper. Now they start seeing them being sold at 13,000. So trying to think of the psychology. Now they're like, okay, I'm probably not going to be able to get it cheaper. Now might be the bottom or close to the bottom. I think now might be a decent time to buy. And that's where you see that stabilizing around the 13 and maybe slightly moving up. I agree though with Nathan though, that I think that whenever we find stabilizing points, I would be surprised if we had another huge shift upward out of nowhere on items like that. It just, I don't know what would be the catalyst for another bull run on something like that. So I would expect what it would need is time. Time for that item to get older, time for new people to come in the hobby and want that item, people in the hobby already saving up money to want to buy that item, and the flippers and the people who are still looking to sell that item to somehow get out of that item and sell it to people who are willing to hold for longer and want the item at those prices for longer. Because I'm sure that there are a number of flippers on all of those items, and people who, and when I say a flipper, I mean a number of people who I think really want to get out of the item and are just sort of waiting for like where they think the highest they can get, is, and that might bring it back down a little bit, again. So, that's what I would say about that sort of stuff. I think long-term, just being completely honest, as I said before, I just much rather have that type of money in an absolute rare card. It just make me like much more comfortable. But I think as a collector, and if you really like that card and you want that card, hopefully it will retain that value. I don't know. I mean, I remember when that card got to 7,000 and I was like, wow, this is way overpriced, 7, 8,000. After, and it was at 2, right. For, before all of this. And then it jumped up to 7, 8,000. And that was a 4 times growth. And I was like, wow, like it scares me at that price. And, now it's at 13 and people are buying it at 18. It's expensive. These cards are expensive. It's just my honest opinion, but we're not financial advisors and we don't really know what the market's going to do, obviously. So
yeah, a lot of it's also going to depend on your situation too. Like I always talk about opportunity cost, and I don't know what that Charizard is to you in terms of opportunity cost.
Yeah.
But if that's like your only Pokemon holding, then it's going to be up to you to decide whether you think that's going to be the best move to hold or to sell, because we just don't know your situation at the end of the day.
Yeah. All right, let's take some questions. Watsy Fetter says, is Sub F Pokemon your YouTube channel? Voice seems right, but sounds different.
Oh, I think I made a YouTube channel a long time ago when Ultra Prism released, and I think I did one video, maybe two. And God, you're gonna cringe super hard, but yeah, if you want to watch them, I think there's like 3 views on it. But
I'll gotta go over
feel
there and watch it
free,
after.
yeah, feel free to laugh at me in the comments. It was, I think that was like my first time ever filming something.
um, Pokemon Hollow says, wouldn't you agree that it's pointless to open Wansy era Japanese packs as all the hollows are extremely cheap versus the prices of booster packs? What's your feeling on that?
I mean, I completely agree with you. Anytime you open a sealed product, you're expecting to lose money, so you're doing it more for the experience.
Mm.
I used to open Japanese product just for fun. It was $20 a pack, like every single pack except for base. And like some of the E series ones were $20. So I would just like on a random Friday night, I'd be like, let me grab 5 packs out of my stack. I just open them. And for some sets, there's a hollow in every pack. For some, it's every two. But it was a very enjoyable experience. Now I probably wouldn't. I mean, it's up to you. It's still very enjoyable, but anytime you open sealed product, you're looking to lose money because it's never gonna. If it's profitable, everyone would open it. This is the best way to put it.
Coyote Bacon says, how abundant do you think mint Cardass cards are?
I think Cardass is still one of those things that is not super mainstream. There were a lot of different Cardass sets, and I'm sure there's still storage units in Japan or just abandoned stores with, boxes of them. But there were so many different sets, and they came out of vending machines. You'd basically put in 100 yen, and it would spit out, depending on the set, like 5 cards in like a little paper band. I still have some sealed boxes somewhere. I think it's storage. Um, but stuff like that, it was definitely mass produced. How much of it still exists that's mint, I think is really going to depend on like how much publicity it gets. As a whole in the Pokemon market, it's still not super publicized. So I think there's still plenty of it out there. But how much is available at a certain point in time, it's probably going to seem a little bit more rare. But just for instance, like the no number Charizard, after it sold for $500,000, we saw a second one get graded like 2-3 months later, and then several more nines also hit the population. So there's definitely stuff out there. I wouldn't bank on the rarity just because you don't see as much of it currently.
I will say that those sets, surprisingly little is being graded every week. Like we're talking about like from the entire set, like under 20 cards, like not like tens and not like mint stuff.
Mhm.
So, it's one of those things. It's like, are there boxes sitting mint somewhere where someone just hasn't, because of the waiting times, because they just don't know the market for them, whatever it is. That's the risk you're taking on certain products like that. Whereas the English side, because it always had value, likely more of that was sussed out, bought, and graded by people who were here earlier on in the market, where they didn't do that same sort of grinding work for cards like that. And so a lot more of those probably exist in the wild. That being said, they're huge sets. The prisms are hard to pull. They're very fragile, right? There are things that, even fresh out of pack, you have a lot of issues, particularly for things like, some of the sets more than others, but
Yeah, I think one other thing is Japan's pretty, it's kind of its own market. And PSA Japan has opened, although they're on pause right now until September again. But there's not very many people in Japan grading cards. So I think as that becomes more of a norm, we'll probably see more of it come out of Japan. But I know of a couple sellers who have pretty good positions in them. It's not like it's gonna like be anywhere close to like English set cards, but there is more out there, is what I will say.
And then the question with that is like the people who do grade them, are they looking to sell them, or do those actually ever hit the American market, or maybe it popularizes it more in Japan? And they buy it more there and it kind of stays there. That's that type of thing. It doesn't really affect the prices here. So yeah, interesting to see over time. Squeaks is with us. He says, Nate, show us the juice.
I don't have too many cards here. I guess I'll show you a couple other things, but I showed you all the number 1 trainer. I have the number 2 here as well. These are actually about to get shipped off to the PWCC vault because their deal is just too good right now to not take advantage of. The Tropical Beach Champion here as well that's going there. There's only 6 copies of this in existence, and it's the first year that a champion card was ever released. So for 2004 to 2011, there was no champion. It stopped at finalist. Some like personal collection things.
That card, Nate. I didn't know you owned one of those.
I actually have 2.
All right, we might have to work a trade off camera or something. We'll have to see.
All right. I mean, I'm definitely open to it. Like I said, I collect Chinese cards.
Yeah.
So this is one of them. So I only have 4 PSA 10s from first edition Hollows.
Yeah.
Funny enough, these 2 are pop 1s, which I have a friend, Quachancy, that I always joke. I'm like, you're going to go for the master set in languages, right? So those are just some personal things. I actually have one thing that's really cool that I'll show you. I'm going to have to stand up to get it, though. Let's see. Sorry, give me 1 second.
No problem.
So I still need to get this framed, but I don't know if y'all recognize what this is.
I don't.
This will probably help.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so it's the original art for the Black Star promo number 12, the Mewtwo.
Christopher Rush artwork.
Yes, so that's one of my favorite things that I've picked up. Yeah. But it's just when I had the opportunity to
first cards I bought. That was one of the first cards I bought when I got back in the hobby, was the Legendary Collection, like reverse hollow PSA 10 version of that. Because I thought it was really cool that Christopher Rush designed a Pokemon card.
Yeah, it's actually really cool. I talked to the Rush family, and basically he was invited to Japan, and he was chatting with some higher up Pokemon employees, and one of them jokingly asked like if he would want to illustrate a card, and he said yes. So he ended up illustrating the Mewtwo, and he actually drew the Mewtwo on a Wacom tablet, and I was able to get the original file, which is super cool. And I printed that off on just like a see-through or an opaque, I don't know what those sheets are called, but I basically printed it on that sheet so I could display it with the background art. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm interested. I'm actually looking at buying some original art and some other hobbies right now, because I feel like there's just so much competition in like a Magic the Gathering, like some of these like more where it's a much more established market for it. I'm looking in some of these like less established card hobby original arts. I think they're cool. It's just I'm not sure exactly what to do with them, but
yeah, I definitely buy it from my own enjoyment. I don't necessarily think that they're gonna go up to the moon or anything. I bought a Harry Potter original art from the trading card game.
Oh, cool.
Recently. But they're just stuff that I would love to hang. Like I like oddities a lot.
Yeah.
So like since I collect Chinese, I have every single uncut sheet from base set for Chinese. And I have some like Yu-Gi-Oh! Uncut sheets as well, but I like things that I can hang and frame. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I think part of what's been going on for me is I move quite a bit. And so I like haven't really built like a Pokemon room or like a collectibles room, because there's going to have a lot of different collectibles in it. And so eventually when I get that, I'm going to have more of like a desire to get some like bigger wall pieces like that. Although I'm planning on, putting up my PSA cards, and I already like have the cases. I'm just waiting to move to a place where I can fit all of that. But uncut sheets and things like that, I've almost bought a few over the years, but it was just like, I'm just not sure where I'm going to hang this, and I don't just want to like keep it in a closet. And I don't know. It's,
Yeah, I completely understand that.
it's so hard to value. It just feels like because there's just no sales history on these things, or it's so hard to, and then it's so hard to they're not graded obviously. So like you see these tears on some of them, and you're like, like how much of that really decrease the value if it's like perfectly mint versus not. It's just not a. It's hard for me to value those sorts of things. And then I think that the collector base for it is so much less that I worry about the liquidity if I ever needed to sell. So I have this like negative list that has always stopped me from from pressing the accept button.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, I've bought more and more things that are hard to value. And at the end of the day, anytime something like that comes up, it's just, are you, the buyer and the seller, both happy with the price?
Yeah.
If you can both walk away happy, then that's like the most you can ask out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that 101 trophy card.
Yeah. I actually got to interview him. It was really cool hearing like his different stories about back then.
Where's that interview? On Instagram?
So I took notes, but I didn't record it. I did it was a webcam interview with him. Um, but I didn't, he said that I could publicize it, but I also didn't want to like invade his privacy because I don't think he wanted a ton of attention.
Mm.
Um, so I do have notes. I'll probably eventually publish the notes, but there's some things in the interview that I'm keeping to myself because I'm hunting for certain things. So eventually I'll release the notes of the interview.
Evil investor, no, evil collector. Oh, yeah, dude. I'm gonna have to make a video on just like the entitlement at some point of people. It's unfortunate, like people don't understand how lucky they are that like all of these guys are willing to share as much as they're willing to, because there's such a strong financial incentive to share absolutely nothing.
Yeah,
And it's unbelievable to me.
I've always been really cautious about sharing things that like aren't my own story.
Yeah.
That's one of the other reasons I didn't want to post it because I know how the internet is, and if I posted that online, there's a very good chance that people would reach out to him. And I don't know that he necessarily was thinking about that when he said that I could post the interview, so I just decided not to. I'd rather maintain that relationship.
Nutty786 asks, what's both of your thoughts about the cards in the EX era when Nintendo took over the IP? Would you consider them rare and sought after? What's your general take on the original EX era? Do you like that era?
I honestly don't. And I know that's probably controversial, but during that time, there was just not a lot of interest in Pokemon. And I also did not play during that time. And I do agree that it is rare in the sense that there was less printed than during the WotC era. But at the same time, there's also less people interested in that block. So rarity does not necessarily equal that it's going to go to the moon. There's only so many set collectors who are going to collect all, what is it, like 80 something sets that are out now. So, you do have to think about the demand side as well. And I particularly really hate sealed EX era boxes because like a lot of people don't know, but the gold star cases are mappable. There's 3 gold stars in every case. You could very easily open a case, open box until you hit 3 gold stars and then sell the rest. And there's no chance. When something's seeded every 2 boxes consistently and cases are 6, it's very hard to buy loose boxes. I've only ever bought EX era boxes to just resell. I've never held on to them long term. I don't like it. Like I'm sure there is merit to doing it, but personally, I like the gold stars. I don't really like too much else from the EX era, and that's probably pretty controversial.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I actually like some of the first sets even before gold stars. And then I think that there are various really cool looking cards throughout it. And then I think they're like a set like EX Team Rocket Returns has a really great identity to it. And I think I think every EX holo and just the regular dark holos are killer. Like
Yep.
I think that they're just way. I don't think it matters if people collected that as a kid or not. I just think that people want that and will always want that. But I do agree with you that as a whole, particularly when you start getting in some of the lesser sets and the lesser EXs, even if there's only 15 to 20 of them, should it really be a $1,500 card right now in PSA 10?
Mhm.
Maybe, but I think that it is a little bit of a risk there. So I I agree. And I think with the booster boxes, it's tough, man. I mean, it's impossible. You know, it's
So
like,
there,
do you
there
want
are.
a first edition box where there are going to be way, way, way more of them, you know, or
Mhm.
do you want you know, what's going for about 15K? Probably red leaf green is in there. That could be a little bit over 15, but
Yeah. So there's definitely like gems that you can pull from every single era. So like EX Magma and cards, those are so hard to grade. They're the foiling where if you look at them the wrong way, there's going to be a scratch on it.
yeah,
So like those cards in PSA 10s, I think if they're a decent price, those are great pickups for a long-term hold because I just don't see the PSA 10 population on those going too high. The centering had issues, the foiling is too easy to scratch. Same thing, Team Rocket Returns is my favorite set of the EX era. Hands down,
isn't
it's
it
a Team
everyone's
Rocket set.
outside of the gold star Rayquaza? Isn't everyone's favorite? I mean, if someone can tell me if it
Yeah.
like, and if you say that it isn't, I think you're just being one of those guys who like doesn't want to agree with everyone else. Because like there are a lot of sets that I like from that era and a lot of cards. So you know, but that set is so cool. I mean, when I first saw that, I was like, I want all of these. Like, what are these? These are so amazing.
Yeah.
An adult.
For,
So
for EX Team Rocket Returns, I will say for the EX era, I love the fact that reverse foils have the set stamp on it.
I was gonna say that too.
That's one of my favorite things. And the
It
set stamp
provides a
for
lot
EX
more
Team Rocket
value.
Returns and the different types of foiling on them as well are just great. For I actually I hate that EX Deoxys is the most expensive set just because of Rayquaza. I think the foiling from EX Deoxys doesn't look good. I don't think the set name looks good on the cards. So I mean, there's definitely gems in every single era of Pokemon, but just as a whole, I'm not. It's definitely not my favorite era, I guess is the way that I should put it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
probably came off as just like super disliking of all EX era.
No, no. I'm glad you. I want you to speak your mind. I think everyone here wants you to speak your mind. We want to hear your honest opinions. It's helpful. And as someone who's been doing it a while, I think yeah, that point you made was a point that I was going to make, which I think is so key too. And the reverses, I think, have a chance long term to offset some of the terrible value of the rest of those boxes. You know, when we talk about expected value versus like the price of because I think that getting some of those reverses in PSA 10, whether it's like if we're talking about EX Team Rocket, like getting the Dark Dragonite, you know, reverse in PSA 10, which has quite a bit of value, which is like a really cool looking card, or the Dark Gyarados from that, or you know, some of these cool regular hollows or non-hollows, getting those in that reverse hollow. I think it adds some value to those boxes and will be the only way to get those, you know, or one of the only ways to have a very good chance of getting a number of them in 10 as we go along here, you know. And the number of cards being graded from these sets are extremely low right now. Very similar to the Diamond and Pearl era. Just not a lot being graded. I was hearing forever that as soon as prices would go up, we'd see tons of these come out. I haven't seen that yet. So I'm still waiting. I'm tracking the pop reports. I won't feel comfortable until like a year from now because of all the backlog and just trying to sort through that. But from people I talk to, like the middlemen people who I know who are sending in lots and lots of cards, the vast majority of it's WotC and Modern. You know, so and the vast majority of WotC stuff is like 7-8 quality when we get into like first edition hollows, and then lots and lots of commons, uncommons, and that's just the majority of the backlog. So
Yeah,
I feel
it's
very
actually
confident in that.
it's funny because there's I collect energies as well. It's like kind of just a side thing. Whenever I get energies in collection, I just keep them.
Yeah,
But the Team Rocket Returns double rocket energy is one that I've been looking for in a 10, but I think it's still pop zero. So I just settled for a 9 for now. But that's like one of the things, like those cards are pretty hard to grade. So if anyone grades a 10, hit me up.
Yeah, and you're going to have completionist type collectors, either Nathan or someone else. And I've had very high offers on certain very low pop items that to me, it's like way over the value of what this card should be, but is, solely based on that, obviously, that there are none and someone has the money and just really wants that item, So I think that's an interesting thing to watch long term. Let's see. Rip and Flip says, would you say it's a good time to buy sealed product in general with the retracement, the general retraces? And that's a broad question. It's like what sealed product, but
yeah. So I'm gonna assume he's talking about like vintage, like pre-black and white.
Okay.
And I actually had a conversation with someone because there was a collection that was offered to me that I'm probably gonna put an offer on, but unless I get it at a like very reasonable price, I'm probably not gonna buy it. Because right now there are a lot of people with sealed product holdings, and we're talking like cases on cases of stuff. Just looking at the last Heritage block, that was one collection from I think one former store owner, and then in the next Heritage block we have another probably like 40 or 50 boxes. There's a lot of sealed product out there, and I think that in the next couple months a lot of it will be bleeding onto the market because the prices have kind of stabilized, and I think some people are going to be offloading certain positions and whatnot. And that's just my personal thoughts. Like, I could be completely wrong and it could go back up to the moon. But right now, I'm very cautious about buying sealed product, particularly the vintage kind. I'd much rather just wait and see where it goes. And maybe I don't get it at the low, but I'd rather not buy it and then have a lot more come onto the market. The print runs for those were massive.
The market does a really bad job of correctly valuing sealed product, in my opinion, because there's no pop report for sealed product and we don't know print numbers. And so most people aren't very well connected. Just speaking bluntly, they don't really know how much of the stuff is out there. They don't know that they're individuals with 20, 30, 40, whatever, now. And I think that if they knew psychologically, they when they saw that item, they wouldn't have the same sort of like, oh my God response. Whereas to me, it's very interesting that like you have like a PSA 10 of the best card from one of those sets that you're definitely not going to get in a 10 if you open one of those boxes, or like the odds are like, very, very small. For me, almost always there's been better value in that. And I think over time, I think that as more of these boxes get opened up or come onto the market or all these sorts of things, that's where I would go in vintage WotC. That's where I've almost always gone. I think that these numbers are always going down because they're being opened, with sealed product, while the PSA cards are always increasing in pop report. So you should buy the sealed product because it's definitely going to do better. Is a simple and true fair point underneath that. But I think that we're far off. That psychologically the market believes there's way, way less of this, and a lot of people buying believes there's way, way less than that, whereas they know exactly how many of those PSA cards there are. And so I'm more comfortable with feeling like people are buying those things with the knowledge that they need to buy them. So I'm more comfortable in a lot of those price points myself.
Yeah. So it's definitely a different beast because I mean, a lot of the sealed product that I see is from like former store owners or WotC employees, or even people who are into baseball or, different collectibles beforehand who bought positions in them because their kids like them. They were just planning to, eventually open them with their kids, but then their kids, stop liking them. But every time I've bought like a sealed collection, it's always been 10 plus boxes. A lot of times it's a lot more than that. And since I started in the last 2 years, I think I've bought 3 different collections with 20 plus boxes in them. And, I've just never been a huge fan of sealed because maybe it's because I've seen so much of it and it's just risky to me. I don't want to be the minnow with like my two sealed boxes, unless it's just something that I truly collect, like Chinese base first. I do have sealed of those. Um, but when I know there's whales that could potentially, make my position very illiquid for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a strong argument for either very low pop PSA 10 cards where you're really, set cards, and condition rarity probably is the best argument for condition rarity that you can make, which is just that, like, it is what it is. There are just only a few of these things. Although you never know, I guess, with the extra copies that can pop up of things, but on the trophy side. But I feel more confident in, like, that there are probably less than 500 Art Academy cards of each Art Academy. Like, even if there are 500, somehow there are 400 additional of each in extra copies that somehow come out over the next 50 years, which I think was a very conservative, I don't think that's going to happen. They're probably, 110, 120 each in circulation or whatever with some of these extra copies that Collector Cash may have gotten. But I just feel much more comfortable in that than I do in this sort of stuff as an investment, because it's very difficult to predict demand, but supply is objective. And I think that I like to rely on that supply, particularly when I think demand is being driven by something that is false, by false or misleading information, which is what I felt like the market on the sealed stuff was driven up by false and misleading information this year. So
I think also, like, since we're talking about the Pokemon market as a whole, sealed and singles, they rise together. It's not like sealed just goes up infinitely while singles stay where they are. So I think that it's fine to choose either one, but just my personal feeling is I'd rather be in singles and graded cards than sealed, unless it's something I'm truly holding for myself.
Alrighty. Yeah, do you want to touch on modern sealed at all, in case he was talking about that? Or I'm interested in Japanese modern and Japanese specialty products and things like those Mario Pikachus. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on, because I have a hard time understanding exactly what to do with those types of products and where they're going to go in the future. So
Okay, so English modern, I'm going to be a Debbie Downer for sure. I don't like it. I think I have two boxes of Chilling Reign, and they're left over from a con that I did, and I'm gonna sell them too. It's just I don't like English modern. If you're holding it, you're looking like super long timeline. Like Vivid Voltage, it was relatively short print when it released. Went up to like 250 a box. Now distributors can't get rid of them. You can still order them since the reprint. And so English modern is always open to more reprints. And Pokemon Company isn't just going to leave money on the table if there's demand for a set that they can still print. You can look at Roaring Skies and Primal Clash and XY Breakthrough and whatnot. There wasn't even a ton of demand for those other than Roaring Skies, and Pokemon still reprinted them. So it's like I'm just very hesitant to put my investment in the hands of a company who would benefit from reprinting something because they would generate more revenue, or just leave it on the table. Like what is stopping them from reprinting everything from the last 2 years? Like there's absolutely nothing, and it's actually beneficial for them too. For Japanese, I'm a little bit more okay with holding it, just because Japan hasn't had a huge history of reprints since after the first or second or third printing of a set after its release. And so I'm still like, I still wouldn't put all my eggs in one basket for that. Like, I'm not saying that you should go buy, Tag All Stars at 200 or 300 a box. But when you get in at or very close to MSRP on Japanese products, I think it's fine to sit on it. That's probably the only modern that I would touch, and the only modern that I sit on myself, to be honest. Like I get boxes, like depending on the set, from like 35 to 40 a piece. And then I sit on them. Like I have a pretty large position in Dream League, and if anyone fire sells because of that, sure, go ahead. But I think I have like maybe 250 boxes of Dream League left, and that's done very well. I have holdings in Double Blaze, Miracle Twins.
Yeah, what's Dream League selling at right now?
Dream League, I have it listed on my eBay for 198 a box, and they sell pretty consistently.
Yeah.
It's slowly crept up from about 120, and I've just been moving it up. I list 12 boxes at a time. When they sell, I'll adjust the market price. Overall, Japanese is by far the safer modern bet, but not if you're getting it at scalper prices. Like those 25th anniversary Pikachu and the Pokeball set that are selling for like $1,000 on pre-order when I think the MSRP is like 75 or 80. That's nuts to me. Like you're pricing in like probably 25 more years of growth. Like at the 50th anniversary, maybe those will still be $1,000. But anything Pokemon prints, they're printing in quality. They're never, no matter how low or how high the printer demand is and how little access they have to it, they're never going to print like 10 copies or 30 copies of something unless it's a trophy card or something that has a limited release like a lottery promo. So anything like that is going to be mass produced. How much of it comes to the US side, how much of it, is going to be held versus resold, those are all questions that you can look into. But when you're paying 15 times what something is on release, it just makes no sense to me. Like, and also pre-ordering. When you pre-order something like that, if it goes higher, the seller's just likely to cancel. If it goes lower, then they're just going to ship it to you and bill you for it. Like there's just not a ton of.
There are reputable sellers, but you
Yeah,
have to be careful. Like
yeah,
there are a couple people I pre-ordered things from before that I had a relationship with and that I knew, for example, that, you know, it's very clear, like they're taking a gamble, I'm taking a gamble, and we don't know if it's going to go up or down, but I'm going to get it at that price type of thing.
yeah. But there's also other factors that play into it that the seller has no control over, like EV Heroes when they change it to a lottery, or
Sure.
even the 25th anniversary, the stamp set. All of those have been changed to lotteries, and anyone who
Yeah.
pre-sold before
Yeah.
that is probably not filling your order.
Yeah. Yep.
So there's
So you're loaning someone money and you're not going to ever get the product in some situations.
yeah. So it's definitely like modern something that I will pick some up for myself to open and enjoy, but I'm just not a fan of it currently. I sold my EV Heroes. There's also a reprint coming. I think it's late August or September, if I remember correctly. And then I actually didn't get any boxes of the new set, which was the Rayquaza and the Duradillon. I may be saying the name completely wrong, but um, I didn't get any boxes of that. The 25th anniversary, I'm just gonna wait and see what happens. Like I signed up for the lottery. If I get one, I get one. If not, I'm not gonna buy it for $1,000 on the secondary market. Same with celebrations. I think after Shining Fates release, I think celebrations is gonna be plentiful.
Mhm.
So I think the printers are catching up. I think Pokemon's been able to fill more orders, like the Vivid Voltage re-release is a sign that there is printer allocation now. I think that Pokemon has adjusted their printing quantity to current demand. And since those things are scheduled so far in advance, we could even see an overprinting of a lot of product like Battle Styles or Chilling Rain.
Yeah. I think too, a lot of this stuff comes down to, as I'm repeating again, that opportunity cost. And I think that, even if you do make money on some of these things, there might be part of why we don't put our money in there is because we just see because we see greater opportunity with maybe the advantages that we have with our connections or the knowledge that we have in certain things that other people don't have. So I think part of it's like that for me. It's like, well, everyone can buy, everyone can go on eBay and buy the newest, Pokemon set. Not everyone has done the research to know about a specific card or a specific variation of a sealed product, for example, like you bought on PWCC, which is gonna potentially net you a much bigger return and might have less downside and might be in some cases more liquid or be safer on the liquidity. So I think that it also worries me that these are just unprecedented times
Yep.
And modern product is unprecedented right now. Modern product has never really been investable like this by the modern man, by the average Pokemon collector hoarding a lot of it. And so I just don't think we know what that's going to mean for the market.
Yep.
And if Pokemon prints a demand and people just keep hoarding it, it's just more and more product that's going to be, sitting sealed that eventually is going to need to get opened or sold or, and then opened in order to remove that product from circulation. And so I just worry about the long term, even the long term of products like that, there's just going to be too much out there. But nobody knows. And that's the thing. That's the thing with that. And for me, there are things that I feel like I'm more confident that I know, or tend to have better upside and less concern and risk. And I'm just always very worried about very high supply items. So I just tend to shy away because if there were no options at all, would I take a flyer on some of these, like the most popular English modern sets, if I could get them at distributor prices or near distributor prices? Maybe, right? Maybe it'd be worth it. So that's what I would say. Let's see. I'm going to the bottom of the chat here. If anyone has questions they want to add at the bottom, I'm sure we've skipped over many, but I'm just kind of chilling and grabbing a few as we go. So RNGesus says, even if Japan does second and third waves of like printing a product, and I think he's trying to say like additional unexpected waves of probably printing, like if they do that, which is likely not going to happen. But if they do, on a product like EV Heroes, do you expect that to affect the price?
Absolutely. If you notice also, so we know that another print run's coming in late August or September.
Mm-hmm.
That also syncs up with Evolving Skies, the English release. And Japanese product, I've been selling Japanese sealed for a while, and the cycle is you always want to sell as much as you can before the English release. When the English release hits, you just hold the product long term, whatever's left. And I think that's going to hold true for EV Heroes as well, because a lot of people, they want to get them early. So they're willing to pay that premium when there's low supply. But when Evolving Sky comes out first, that's going to be very hyped. And I think Japan's going to kind of get put on the back seat for a while. Also, we don't know how large that print run's going to be. If it's like, every store gets one case or two cases, then maybe the prices will retain. But if every store gets, 10, 20 cases, then I think we're going to see that creep down. So there's a lot of factors, but I personally would not be holding EV Heroes as like an investment right now. I'd just wait and see what happens with the reprint and potentially look to pick some up if you want to then.
Yeah, I've always been interested in the relationship between and I also wonder how much it has to do with like how similar the English set is to the Japanese set. Like, are they putting, are they taking two different Japanese sets which both have like really good identities and then mashing it together in sort of a set that doesn't really make that much sense in English? Or is there a kind of a more similar vibe in the set? And I think when you see that, and or the cards aren't cooler or that much cooler or interesting on the Japanese side. So for example, like Pokekayun, where like the Radiant collection looks much better, for example, on the Japanese side. Like there are reasons why maybe Pokekayun, makes a lot more sense in Generations, for example, or something like that. But when we look at like Shiny GX, which I think was an interesting like example of this, Shiny GX was so hot. It was absolutely all the rave. And it was exactly what Nathan is talking about right here. It sold extremely well. It went up really high. People loved Hidden Fates, loved the Shiny Vault. And then the English one came out and nobody talked about Shiny GX anymore. Now, Shiny GX, I don't know the prices right now. I assume it's doing quite well. Do you know the prices of those boxes offhand, Nate?
I think they're in their like mid 300s.
Yeah.
I have one on auction right now on eBay, so we'll see what that settles at. But I
But like
remember
so much lower than CP6, for example. So much lower than CP6.
Yeah, when Shiny GX first came out, it was like about $100 a box, and I didn't get any on the first allocation. That was before I was like heavy into Japanese. And then it was reprinted like 4 or 5 times in Japan. But it was in pretty quick succession. And I got in at 88 a box, and they stayed there for probably about a year. But we never got an announcement for Hidden Fates on the H side, not until almost 2 years after the release of Shiny GX.
Yeah.
And so the price started creeping up to about 150 a box, and I started selling some of my position. And then Hidden Fates got announced, and it tanked them back down to like 80, $90 a box. And that was Pokemon back then. Like
Yeah.
you could wait a year and a
Exactly.
half and just not see much growth.
Yeah.
Um,
It was also so interesting how long it took for Hidden Fates. This is an aside, but how long it took for Hidden Fates to come out after Shiny GX. And people thought part of the dynamic was that people actually started to think this isn't going to come to English. Like there was a talking point that Hidden Fates, and for those who don't know what we're talking about, I apologize, but Shiny GX is basically the Japanese equivalent of Hidden Fates. And there was talk that Hidden Fates wasn't going to come. And then a lot of people, interestingly, were saying that Hidden Fates isn't going to do well on the English side because people are so burned out by Shiny GX. That was a talking point going around the Pokemon circles. We saw what
that was me. I was adamant that Hidden Fates would not come out because I was like, it's been so long. All of the stuff was rotated. When Hidden Fates come out, or when Hidden Fates came out, none of it was usable in standard. And I was like, what? Why would they ever print it after it's rotated? And I thought it wouldn't do well because, at that point, the only base you have is collectors. But that also happened to coincide with when Pokemon started getting more and more popular.
Yeah.
And then it was just like everyone was going for Hidden Fates.
Yeah. It was a very different world. I mean, the reason Roaring Skies was so valuable is because of Shaman, it's because of playability. And so it is a different time in Pokemon where playability, and there were a lot of pretty playable cards in Shiny GX. And so a lot of the value was coming from playability and not just the Charizard chase. And then of course, since then, collecting and investing in modern has really exploded and become a huge thing where we're seeing like all these cards and all these rainbow rares and shiny cards and all those sorts of things hit like thousands of dollars, some of these cards. And it's for me, it's sort of a time will tell. Like, does the market have a huge retrace on these sorts of things, or is this the market going forward, for this type of era? Were these shortly printed enough for whatever reason because of pandemic issues and supply chain issues and whatever these theories are, that it's a unique time in Pokemon where this stuff retains value. I don't know, but
yeah, and that perfectly illustrates like two things. Like first is you never know what the Pokemon company is going to do. That's why modern is so risky. And second is you have to know when to admit that you're wrong and whatnot. Like nobody's ever going to be right 100% of the time. So whenever you're wrong, you learn from the mistakes and you just try not to repeat them again. And, no matter how long someone's been in the hobby, nobody ever makes the correct decision 100% of the time.
Yeah, and I think it's often it's about figuring out what did you miss, right? Like what was that piece that you missed? And so in this case, it's I wasn't. To be fair, it's probably like I wasn't expecting Pokemon to boom and then Hidden Fates to be one of these huge catalysts, right? And bring so many people back in the hobby and connect with so many people. I mean, nothing like that had ever happened in Pokemon. Really, it was Pokemon Go that brought people back in 2016, and Evolutions helped a lot because it connected people to childhood. But I would argue it's probably really Pokemon Go that made everyone think about Pokemon again and do Pokemon. And so to have a set bring people back so much or connect with people so much is interesting, with Hidden Fates. And there's so many people collecting now that were like, Hidden Fates brought me into the hobby. Hidden Fates is the first thing I opened. Hidden Fates is what I love the most. And when people have that sort of reaction to it, it'll be interesting to see how a set like that does over time. And, it's going to be important to those people and have a memory for those people. And, whereas for me, like I really like Shiny GX. When I see Shiny GX, I prefer that to Hidden Fates. I'm one of the minority. I never hear people talking about Shiny GX, but it's understandable.
Yeah, it's interesting because you have to adjust your mindset a lot in this hobby as well. Like you can't just be static. For instance, like Evolutions. If you were in the market from 2016, you hate Evolutions. You think it's just overprinted. There was so much product. It was everywhere. But if you got in at like 2019, you
Sure.
love evolutions. You think it is like the god set, like it never goes down, only goes to the moon. And it's a very different mindset from people who enter versus people who have been here from the start of evolutions. So you kind of have to also adjust your own mindset as like a buyer and a seller to understand both parties and gauge for yourself, how you think a set's going to go. Like for me, I bought into Evolutions, I think 4 years after release. I think it was maybe like 3.5. It was like late 2019. Distributors had their last hurrah, and they were selling boxes for like 83 a box. And you would notice it because instead of like the infinite, like please take as much as this as you can for 78 a box, they were like, well, we'll start moving it up to 80 to 83. And I was like, okay, it looks like distributors are starting to run out. I'm gonna pick up my position now, because I just don't think it's gonna go any lower. It's been printed to the dirt. Like there's just not a lot of space for it to go down. And that turned out to be a very good decision. But if I had held on to my thought that Evolutions is trash, I would have lost out on a very good opportunity.
Yeah, I think for me, and I remember making a video because I saw the same type of stuff, and I saw Unbroken Bonds double to 200, and so I was seeing all these modern sets jump up, but a number of the Sun and Moon sets and evolutions was staying put. And my feeling was like, I know these sellers are listing 10,000 evolutions box on eBay, and I think they have 30,000 more. Like for me, it was like that might not even be all of them. And
Yeah.
so for me, it was like it makes a lot more sense to invest in Burning Shadows or buy a few of these other or any. I was like anything else other than evolutions would be a smarter buy because I just felt like there's endless supply, and I have that bias I would argue maybe a bit more experience with the set, so I just know how it ages with people, people really feel about it over time, all that sort of thing. So I think that for me, I felt that, but I also didn't buy because I don't believe, for me, that's a timing the market thing. Like for me, I don't understand the value of those products. It feels very random and hypey that they're being driven up by these prices. And for me, it just was like, even if I felt like there's like easy money to be made, and I did feel that, and I almost bought, I think there were these Burning Shadows. Someone was like fire selling like 48 blister packs of like Burning Shadows for $200 or something. Like there was this huge, and I like almost bought like 1,000, of those Burning Shadows blister packs or whatever, because I was just like, these almost certainly are going to go up in the short term, but I don't know. And maybe this is just stupid of me, but it was like, it just felt like it felt stupid. It just felt like if something doesn't make sense to me, I'm not going to jump on it just because the market's moving that way. It's almost that herd
Yeah.
mentality. And,
I, I
I
think
don't
I
know. That
completely
makes me
agree.
anxious, because how do you time it? And then when do you sell? And, do you sell right away, a week later, a month later, 2 months later? And of course, what ended up happening is that Evolutions was one of the better performing ones, and I was dead wrong. And Burning Shadows was one of the moderate to worst performing ones. In
Yeah.
large part, I think because of the online booster box streamers who Evolutions was great because there were so many cards that people were grading, and there were so many cards that had like a random $100, $200 value. And Burning Shadows was garbage outside of the Charizard and difficult to grade. And so, these types of things. Although, to be fair, I mean, Evolutions, yes, went up to 700, but a bunch of those team up sets have done just as well or even better. There are lots of sets, there are different XY sets that have also moved up, a similar amount or a huge amount by percentage. So,
Yeah. So for me, it's not necessarily about timing the market. I like to look more at distributors. If I see that distributors are running out of supply, that's usually when I like to pull the trigger. And it's not like I'm buying like
no,
1,000 cases. I
yeah.
usually buy like 10 cases or less. And it's only of the sets that I really like myself.
But I've
Like,
been burned, Nate. Like I've been burned. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like sellers will list that they are selling 100 of something. You'll buy it out, and then they'll list 100 more. Right? Like there are countless stories of people experiencing these sorts of things. So, did you have insider info that they were running out, or you just trusted that they didn't have more?
so I never look at eBay because you never know how much is behind on eBay. And whatever is listed is definitely a fraction. I do the same thing. Even if I have 300 boxes, I'm not going to list all 300. But I like to look at distributors at different stores. I mean, I love to talk to stores and get their feel on it. Like, what product is distributor pushing? If a distributor was like, for instance, distributors were pushing evolutions for, 4 years. They couldn't get rid of it every time they would try to offer it to you.
I know.
But when that stopped happening and then the prices started moving up, that's when I was like, okay, I think I'd like to take a position. And even then, I was wrong. Not that I didn't make money, but evolutions I was expecting to hold for at least 5 years. My goal was $400 in 5 years. That was my timeline.
Yeah.
Instead, 8 months later, I sold it for $400, and I was ecstatic. Like, even buying my position with my planned timeline, I was incorrect. You know, so it's
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, you know, the channels and the people who said buy evolutions at 100 and then were telling people to continue to hold when it hit 1,000, I was just like, wow. To me, it's like a delusion, but like, it's is what it is. But and going back to this, that's my biggest. That's the thing I missed, by far the biggest thing I missed. I feel like I think I had a pulse on the rest of the market, on how everything else was doing. The area that I really missed this year and really surprised me was the movement on modern product and this push to modern being investing.
yeah.
And and there were certain people who rode that wave and just made a killing, but I'm not hurting, so it's okay. I mean, at the same time, I was buying those Harry Potter boxes with the money I would have bought Evolution, so it worked out.
Yeah. I think everyone, that's why I think like setting a price target is so important for investments.
Yeah.
Because if I hadn't set that price target of 400, I probably would have held it and been like, oh my God, it's going up by another 50 and it's only been a week,
Yeah.
and maybe I would have been caught holding all the product. But by setting a specific exit point, I was able to, leave at a good time. And although I left some profit on the table, I was very happy with the outcome.
Yeah. Let's see. That's very helpful, Nate. Nate is dropping wisdom for you guys. Let's see. So Giuseppe says first edition Shining Charizard PSA 10 or first edition Shadowless Charizard PSA 8.
If you're making me choose between the two, I mean, I don't even know the value of a first edition Shadowless PSA 8 right now.
It's probably around. I would think it's around maybe 13-ish. Makes sense. Maybe a little less. Maybe 13.
I don't think either is significantly better than the other, is the best way I would put it. I could see either of them going higher than the other, but I think they'll stick pretty close. I mean, base Shadowless first edition is always going to be like the chase Charizard for the majority of the population who collect. And Shining in a 10 is, I mean, the grade there is going to also provide a lot of value. So, I mean,
yeah, I would expect them to move together. I have the same answer.
Yeah.
To me, I don't see how one drastically moves and the other one doesn't, unless there's a lot of, like, there might be periods where there's a lot of like hype or interest, or maybe like around a new Shining set, some people, a big influencer introduces people to Shinings, and there's like all of a sudden the Shining Charizard gets even more, the first Shining Charizard gets more notoriety. Like, I can think of situations where that might happen.
Yeah. So I will say though, like on the Blue Moon opportunity, Shinings are easier to grade than base first. Shinings grade really well. Usually the only issue is centering because there's not much foiling on it. Like it's easy to hide like scuffs and scratches on a Shining card. So if by some chance some guy has like 50 cases of Neo Destiny first edition, Shinings were 2 per box. That was the pull rate, and you could pull 3 in some boxes. So if there's some like huge sealed collection of Neo Destiny, I could see Shining going down, but the same goes for base first in like a mid grade. Like it's not particularly hard to grade. I think if you open a base first edition pack and you pull a Charizard, it's likely going to be in that 8 to 9 range. So
Yeah, I mean, it was one thing, and we had that Shining Charizard question earlier before. It was one thing that made me not jump on that Shining Charizard in PSA 10 earlier was just there are 200 of these graded. That's way, way, way more. I was much more interested in more quickly getting like PSA 10s of like the legendary dogs from Neo Rev, or when I was looking at these sets, and then also understanding that there are a lot of set cards in these sets. And so actually pulling any individual set card, the pull rate isn't that much easier than pulling any individual shining, because there aren't that many shinings in it's similar with the crystal cards in E-Series. I saw better value in some of the regular low pop hollows than I saw with the crystal cards. And those are way outperforming them. Things like I'm hearing private offers on certain like low pop expedition cards for $25,000-$30,000, right, in PSA 10. More than the crystal, Charizard, these types of things. So I think that's where I would go to more. I think that with it, but both those cards, I agree with Nate also that they're just very similar. They're very similar. And I would say, particularly, with Nate's point around that, like, you can expect a 9 or 8 out of a box, it kind of evens that out. And I do think that there are PSA 8 first edition Charizards, probably a number of them in the wild, still, ungraded. Maybe more. I would think that probably there are more PSA 8 first edition Charizards ungraded than PSA 10 quality first edition Shining cards. I think that 8s, they're just, although now PSA is starting to grade harder on everything with the 8s, that maybe, maybe not, but it's
to be up with the pitchforks after you said that.
Well, luckily we're not sponsored by anyone. So I saw Scott say this the other day, and it's the same thing for me. It's like I get like all these I get offers for sponsorships from all these like random companies, and it's just like it would just be so uncomfortable. So I'm gonna like go into I'm gonna go into my like salesman voice, and I'm gonna be like, okay, that's done. Here's what I really think about.
Yeah, you don't want to pitch Raid Shadow Legends.
All right, let's see. People asking about EV Heroes, we talked about that a little bit earlier. Swami says, do you happen to know what happened when Evo jumped to 500 that week? Was it one big seller upping the price and others following? Any insight on that? I was watching it from the eBay front, but how about you, Nate, in terms of the non-eBay distributor front?
I mean, when it made the jump, the distributors were already out of product. Hills Wholesale had a huge holding of it still, so that you could still get it from there. And when they raised their prices, I think overall across the board prices started to raise a little bit. But one of the other reasons I sold is for any box that is that expensive, like if you Googled any other box that was like $400 or $500, you would get maybe like 20 or 30 results. For evolutions, you would hit like 1,000 results. And I was just like, there's absolutely no reason for the price to be here when the demand, or there's no reason for the price to be here when the supply is so high. And I was like, 400, great, I'll take it. I still don't understand that it's 600. It like breaks, it just breaks the law of supply
I sat down and
right
did math on, because I saw about 50,000 boxes leave eBay within a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I was like, do you guys have any idea how much money it took for $50,000 to leave eBay? And if you had thrown that at like a Shining Charizard, how much more that Shining Charizard would be worth? A Shining Charizard would.
We could have probably bought out all of Neo Destiny graded singles with the price that was with a quarter of the price that went into evolutions. Like evolutions to me made no sense when it came to supply and demand.
And it was weird too, because it was getting to the price point where like $600 is a lot. Like the whole argument of like it's cheap and most people in this hobby have an extra $100 to $200, which is a really strong positive argument for a lot of things. Like most people, like there's a market for like $50, $100 cards that doesn't exist for $500 cards. Like that type of argument. It was like that argument is becoming less and less persuasive as this box moves from 100 to 400 to 800. You know, yeah. So we're going on and on about it, and as I do on this channel, but it's something. So let's see what else we got here. Hey, Jody, thank you for being here. Um, Manny asks, do you remember the first couple of graded cards that you bought? And he's thinking of starting to maybe buy some of his first graded cards and wants to hear about like just your general experience and maybe any insider advice you could give.
So the first ever cards that I owned that were graded were ones that I graded myself. And it was kind of an experimental sub because I was seeing that there were more graded cards starting to sell on the market.
Yep.
And the turnaround was so fast back then. I think it was like less than a month for like bulk. And I just felt like I was leaving money on the table by selling the mint stuff raw because I could still sell singles as near mint and just grade the really like top tier that I thought were like pristine. I don't actually think I bought a graded card until I was grading myself for like two years, maybe three, because it just always made more sense at that time to buy raw and grade it because there was so much raw available that was in good condition. Nowadays, I do occasionally buy graded for my own collection, or sometimes I see something that I think is just undervalued and I'll buy it. Um, but I do not remember what the first graded card I bought was. I bought so many. It definitely wasn't something standout. It definitely would have been something that I just bought because I thought it was a good price.
Hmm.
So I don't know if you remember yours.
I do, yeah. Blaine's Charizard, PSA 10 first edition was my first buy. And I remember looking at those sets. I remember I wanted to buy a Charizard first, and I remembered I was choosing between sort of a lower graded PSA, a lower graded base set first edition Charizard, Team Rocket, the Blaine's Charizard, or like a lower graded Shining or a Crystal. Those are sort of like the cards I was looking at for my first purchase. And I had a special connection. I really, really liked Gym Challenge. I remember opening it up as a kid, and I just really loved that card. So I was drawn to that pretty quickly. I really whittled it down pretty quickly to like that or the Team Rocket one, which were probably my two favorites and of those, and the ones I had a strongest connection to as a kid. And the Dark Charizard just seemed, and there just seemed to be a lot more Team Rocket. And I was seeing lots and lots of first edition Team Rocket boxes. A lot more Team Rocket was being graded. And I just felt like the Gym Challenge was probably going to do better long term and be like, it's going to be a little bit harder to get that card. And that's why I went with that one. And, you know, it's done slightly better than Team Rocket, but those are pretty close. Those have always, the Gym Challenge one is usually a little bit more expensive always, and it goes for a little bit more than the Team Rocket always. It sort of has always done that. So kind of similar to Crystal and Shining, that the Shining and the Crystal have always kind of moved together. Usually the Shining was a bit more expensive, although interestingly, I think there was a time this year, and maybe even right now, the Crystal's a little bit over the Shining. I'm not sure. They're pretty close, but
Yeah.
you know.
But if you're just starting to dip your toes in it, Manny, I would do some research first because grading is subjective. You know, it's done by people and people aren't perfect. So I would maybe like look into some like eBay listings with like high resolution scans and just see like what the difference is in like a 7, 8, 9, 10 for all of the different grading companies, and then make your decision on what you like. Because if you're just starting out, there's like you don't have to start out by buying a PSA 10 of a high-end card. You could definitely buy like, you know, a PSA 8 of a card you enjoy that you think is a good value. And I don't know if you're, you know, dipping your toes in as a collector, as an investor, or, you know, what your situation is, but definitely do your research before buying because there are some PSA 10 cards that look like a dog chewed it. And then there's some like PSA 8 cards that look like 10s. So there's definitely a lot to learn when it comes to graded cards.
Yeah. Um, let's see. So I think let's wrap it up maybe in the next 10 minutes, Nate, if that's all right.
Okay.
I'm gonna grab some dinner.
Yeah,
But
that sounds
it's
good.
been great talking to you. Hopefully we'll have you on again. You know, at some point, maybe I'm thinking of doing maybe some like roundtable type stuff in the future with some guys that you know. So
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'll be in
if you're free.
the US for the next like 2 weeks or so.
Yeah,
But when I come back, as long as I'm free, it's always fun to chat.
absolutely. So if anyone has a last minute question or anything, so Bleedsteel says that he thinks now is a great time to be buying cards graded by other companies. What is your feeling about, because that's a hot topic right now being discussed, about other grading card companies, just your personal take on non-PSA graded companies, and maybe particularly some of these even newer ones, even newer than CGC, hitting the scene if you're following it.
God, there's so many new grading card companies, and I personally won't touch anything that's not PSA, Beckett, or CGC. I'm not confident that the other companies are going to make it long term. And if they don't make it, then no matter what the grade is, it's probably not going to hold value. The other thing is, like, I don't know about, a lot of those companies are like garage companies. Like, some dude just ordered slabs from China, and he just has a lamp in his garage and he's grading your cards. And trust is an issue that I have with that for like more expensive cards. Consistency, corruption for anything that's like not a larger company is also an issue in my opinion. But that being said, if you just want your card like for your own collection in some sort of protective slab, I think there are some very cheap alternatives that you can go to, but I wouldn't count on them for resale value. In terms of the big three rating companies, I think if you're looking for a good value, then that's CGC. They grade very harshly on cards. I think harder than PSA and Beckett. So, and they also have high res scans of I think every single card still. So if you ever have a question about condition, just look at the cert, look it up on CGC website, and then you can buy a card for the condition. PSA is the best in terms of value right now. If you're just looking to maximize your value, I think they're a good way to go whenever they reopen bulk. Do not send your cards in at 300 a card. There's very few cards that I would send in at that tier. And then Beckett is just kind of a middle ground between the two. Like, I don't particularly like or like super dislike Beckett. It's kind of random that they grade anything and everything thrown at the wall. So if you want to get like playing cards or like, I don't know, a handkerchief or, a napkin that Ken Sugimori blew his nose with, Beckett will probably grade it. So that's just like a spark notes on,
That's exactly what I always say about Beckett. That's always my thing. It's like they will grade anything. You want to start a new market, just buy something that looks kind of cool, have them grade it, and then throw it on PWCC, and you can start a new market. Whoever those guys were, and maybe you have some insight in this, who started grading those trading cards, they made a freaking fortune. And that was really smart, whoever did that and bought. And I knew some guys who kind of jumped in after who made a killing too, but I don't know who like was the first people to start grading those. Maybe it was like Tsunagu or something from Japan who started it, but like there were guys from the West who went and bought a ton of the sealed product, and they've made like, I want to say some of them have probably made 100,000 on those, just on things that just had like zero market, like that wasn't even a thing like at all 6 months ago. And
yeah,
people love them. I see these Facebook groups and they do these claim sales and people are buying each grading card for like $50.
Yeah.
And I remember those were like $100 for 52 cards. And now they're selling each individual card out of those things for $50. It's mind-boggling.
I remember going to the Pokemon Center in I think 2018, and there were still Mario and Luigi playing cards.
Yeah.
Like those things they weren't worth anything. It was a Japanese seller. I forget who it was, but he graded I think like 2 or 3 different decks and he auctioned them. I think it was with PWCC.
Yeah.
But after those auctioned, you just saw the whole market just disappear in Japan. People bought them out, then people started grading them, and now you see them sell consistently. But I hate that. Like there's very few things in the hobby.
They have such a high pristine rate, and that was part of what people, because and it just shows the irrationality in the market. So people see a lot of pristine and black label cards, and they see value because they're accustomed to like a normal Pokemon card. When it's that, there's value. They're all pristine and black label, guys. Like,
yeah, it's crazy. Like
fresh out of there.
They're just made of different material. Like
Yeah.
you buy a deck of cards, you can play with it for 4 or 5 hours, and it probably still looks new. Like it just blows my mind that people like. I don't think you could get under a 9.5 with those cards unless you physically tried to damage them.
Yeah.
Like it just blows my mind. Like how
Yeah.
much
That was
premium.
another example, Nathan, of where I saw that coming and I didn't jump on it because it was just so stupid. Like it just
Yeah.
was so irrational to me that I was like, even if I feel like, because I there's some hype happening here and momentum happening here. And I had people from who watch my channel start to contact me and ask me about them, which to me is one of the first signs that something's about to take up and probably become irrationally inflated. Um, uh, yeah, but I just didn't jump on it. And I mean, I don't regret these things because for me, these things are like, it's so risky and there are just so many safer bets. But good on those people though and I use it as a really good example of how markets can be very quickly created.
Mm.
And it's a great example of human psychology around take a similar looking thing, put it in a case that people equate value, put a gold or black at the label at the top, and then it has Pokemon, and then sell the Lugia Ace card for like $1,000, that was worth 5 cents, 10 cents 6 months ago, or no, it was worth nothing. The person who had that idea and then got Becca to do it, that's very clever. I mean, that's very, very smart. And even if the market hadn't gotten so stupid with those, like even if those had sold for like $100 each, that's still bank. That's still making bank. And to me, that would have been a much more reasonable, understandable price point, given how difficult it is to get things graded, how long that takes, and the risk that it might not come back, particularly with a black label, the risk on it that black labels, the black labels and the pristine tens are, who knows the difference between those. I mean, I see black labels that look like barely, like don't even look like they deserve to be pristine tens. And then I see plenty of, 9.5s and tens that look like they could be black labels. So it's very, when you get into that high, perfection, it's sort of like, either they're seeing something that I'm not seeing with my eye, just with the naked eye, but yeah, crazy. Good sign of a mania.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not a fan of black labels, even when it comes to like normal Pokemon cards.
Yeah.
When it comes to that point where it's so subjective that like I can't tell the difference between like, a mint copy versus a black label, like I'm just not willing to pay 15 times the price for that black label. It like for such a minute difference. And you could say the same about CGC perfects or, PSA 10s for some cards, but the premium on a black label is just insane to me. How like a $10 card can go to $5,000 because of some subjective, person looking at it and being like, this is a black label.
Yeah. Well, it's the world of and to bring it to what I was talking about before, it's the world of condition rarity. And when you get it, versus absolute rarity, and you're playing there, there's an added level of risk is like, it's much easier. Like for me, I'm much more comfortable buying like a PSA 4, some Pikachu trophy card than I am a black label, of like a WotC, even like a WotC first edition holo or something, or more likely not a black label, but a pristine 10. Because those are like, I'm trying to think, like there's only like a couple black labels of any WotC holo, I think, or I don't know. But I do see the pristine 10s come up, and you can get like I would see those some of them sell for like $15,000-$20,000, things that the PSA 10 was only like 8,000 or 6,000. And Lugia was a good example of that pristine Lugia that sold for 140,000, I think, in that PWCC auction. And then a week later, 2 weeks later, the PSA 10 sold for like 70 or 60, something like that. It's a huge amount of markup.
The premiums on some things just, I mean, for some people who want just the best, like I guess they're willing to pay it, but for me, it just doesn't make sense for me to ever buy them or hold them.
It's just such a risk because you could just keep cracking open something and just grade it again and again and again until you finally get that. I mean, it creates such a such a risk there. So I think we're probably just gonna take one more question here. So Manny asks, do you guys watch pack opening channels? What are your feelings on pack opening channels? Do they bore you? That's what he's asking.
It's a funny story. I'm friends with Lean Hart, so I do watch pack opening channels, and I've done a couple like videos with him. I do enjoy watching them because for me it's like I don't always have the time to open my own packs, or I also don't enjoy them as much because I don't have like the hype personality. Like I can pull like a base first Charizard and I'll be like, all right, time to sleeve it, and then I'm just done, you know? So like seeing someone else's excitement is good. And it's not like I'll watch every single one. Like, but occasionally I'll be like, okay, I want to see something get opened. I'll just pull up a random video and watch it. And it's nice being able to participate in that feeling without putting my own money into it or my own time. Um, I will say I don't enjoy pack openings nearly as much as I did before. I think anytime I used to do modern when I grinded, and I would open 10 cases of every new set to sell singles. And once you do that for like 2 sets, you never want to see a pack again. I still open stuff with my wife occasionally, but I think channels are a very good opportunity for people to see openings and participate in the excitement of things that, you know, maybe they normally can't or they don't want to risk um, the financial side for, you know, opening like a base first pack and pulling no hollow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think they're great. I think it's great entertainment. I think that it's a cool thing that I think particularly sort of the new form which took this year, which was like the live stream pack openings and pack selling.
Yeah.
Of course, people were doing that and doing breaks in the sports card world for a long time, and there are people in the Pokemon card who have been doing it for a long time. Places like Facebook and other places I'm aware of. But that obviously really blew up this year as you know, with streams with 10, 5,000 people watching, 10,000 people watching, some sort of thing. I think that was really cool because there's a certain energy to the chat that it's happening live. I've watched a ton of Leonhardt's videos over the years, particularly earlier on, just to see sets being opened up for the first time, like when I got back in the hobby in particular, because I got to see Skyridge, him open Skyridge, and some of these sets that I wasn't going to pay, just as you said, I wasn't going to pay those prices myself. And so I got to live vicariously through that and also get introduced to cards through the pack opening channels and introduced to sets. So I think too, for people who are newer, it's your first introduction to like, do I like the cards in that set? That sort of thing. I think also watching new sets being opened, like a brand new set. Do I want to buy that set? Well, let me go watch someone open it and see if it seems like fun and see if it seems like it's something I might want to buy. So I think that there are a lot of uses for it. I also like putting it on in the background sometimes.
Yep.
So,
yeah. I think another use for pack opening channels is to look at condition as well as pull rates.
Sure.
Because 5 years ago, you would have never been able to see the pull rates of some of these sets. But now, due to the internet and how many, or maybe not 5 years, maybe 10, before it was widespread, uploading videos of opening boxes, you would have to research and really talk to other people to know the pull rates of certain things, like what average condition comes out. But now you have a lot of references that you can go to, watch it at 2x speed, or even just, scroll through and just look at the things you're interested in. Same thing with like one of the reasons I enjoyed the Darium's channel back when they did like 1,000 box openings or 1,000 pack openings, whatever it was. I could watch their channel and get a quick look at the pull rates for the set. And that's one thing that I really enjoyed. And there were times where I would decide whether or not to open a set based on their pull ratio. So you can also use it as a learning opportunity. And I think a lot of people, miss that part. And just a third point for like channels that open packs is they create engagement. Like any hobby is only as strong as, the new people they bring into it. Like Magic is having that issue where they're having such a hard time finding new players and getting engagement from the younger crowd. the old guard for Magic is huge, and they have deep pockets, but you don't see many, like, 15, 18-year olds playing Magic that often. Whereas Pokemon has done very, very well at bringing in a younger crowd every single generation, and the pack openings and the YouTubers really drive that as well. I think that's important for our hobby.
I think Nate's spot on. I think we're gonna end it there for today. With that message. Thank you so much, Nate. It was really a pleasure getting to talk to you more. We talked, a few times in various rooms and different sorts of things, but it's the first time we got to really just talk like one-on-one. And also thank you so much for just coming on the channel, doing it live and answering some viewers' questions. And we'll hopefully have you back in the future. This is definitely a guy who, if you have niche questions about very specific things, he might be one of the 20, 30, 40, 50 people in the world who might be able to have an answer. In some cases maybe only 10 or so. Really appreciate you taking the time. Any last sort of message or anything you want to leave on? You do have an Instagram that people can follow you at if you want to share that. That's up to you.
Yeah, my Instagram is just sub_f_Pokemon. I don't use it that much right now, but you guys are free to follow me. And if you have any questions, I'll try my best to answer them. But I really enjoyed being on the show. I would just say, like, don't be afraid to get involved in the community, to reach out to people, learn. Um, Pokemon has a very, very friendly, collector base and community, and it's not like that for a lot of hobbies. So it's something that I definitely think you should leverage and use to your advantage.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for hanging out with us. And I will see you all probably again. I'll have a video for you guys in probably a few days in some sort of topic. And I might do a video on. I think people don't want me to make some of these videos, but I kind of want to do a video on some of the toxicity I'm seeing and just give kind of like my opinion on all the some of the gatekeeping stuff that's happening without naming any other content creators or names. Cause I don't know. I got a couple of messages today, Nate, that I was like, oh my God, like, just people upset with me over stuff. It's getting to a point. I don't know if you receive any of that or in circles where you see any of it, but you might get something now that you've come on a fairly, a channel where, a few thousand people at least will see this.
Yeah.
But, people have, it's a lot of like, self-righteousness and a lot of like being really questioning people's motives when you don't know them going on. And I don't know, it's unfortunate. But I do think that part of it's understandable and blah, blah, blah. We won't get into it right now. But,
Real quick, one thing I want to touch on that I'm just reminded of.
Please, Nate.
We had a sealed question earlier, and I just want to say, be careful when you're buying sealed. Resealing product is a real thing, and you can look on Mercari or whatever. There are deals that are too good to be true. A lot of those are fake boxes or, even resealed boxes. I know people who have been in this market for, 10, 15 years who have messaged me because they're not sure if a box is resealed or not. And, I've even looked at boxes and I said, unless I hold this in my hand in person, I can't tell. So especially when things are this expensive and one purchase can potentially make or break, probably 6 months of your life when it's, purchases this large, just be careful is one thing I want to say.
Yeah, it's an important public service announcement. Yeah. All right. I will see all of you guys soon. And yeah, thank you so much, Nate.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Take care, guys.